The Galactic Council chambers had never witnessed such silence. Ambassador Kethvar of the Zoranian Empire shifted uncomfortably in his crystalline seat, his four eyes darting between the assembled representatives of the 12 most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. The humans sat at the far end of the curved table, their delegation of 3 looking impossibly small and fragile compared to the towering Megalons or the heavily armored Krex warriors. "This is preposterous," hissed High Regent Salthek, her serpentine form coiling with agitation. "These mammals dare to challenge the Eternal Compact? They have barely learned to walk among the stars, and already they think themselves our equals." The human ambassador, a middle-aged woman named Sarah Chun, remained perfectly still. Her dark eyes held a calmness that made Kethvar's chitinous shell crawl with unease. Something about these creatures had always disturbed him, though he couldn't quite place what it was. "The Compact has governed this galaxy for 10,000 years, rumbled General Thax of the Megalon hegemony, his massive frame casting shadows across half the chamber. "It has brought peace, order, and prosperity to over 14 billion worlds. What could these newcomers possibly know about galactic governance?" The other delegates murmured their agreement. The Veltar hive mind pulsed with collective disdain, while the energy beings of Nexus Prime flickered with irritation. The humans had been granted membership in the Galactic Council only 50 years ago, a gesture of goodwill that many now regretted. Their homeworld, Earth, was nothing special, a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable star in a backwater spiral arm. Their technology was primitive, their military laughable, and their lifespan pathetically short. Yet here they sat, proposing to overturn millennia of established law. "The Compact," Sarachin finally spoke, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber despite its softness, "states that all sapient species must contribute to galactic society according to their capabilities and specializations. It's a beautiful principle, in theory. In practice as well," snapped Kethvar. "The Zoranians provide computational power, the Krex offer military might, the Veltar handle communication networks. Each species contributes what they do best. This system has worked perfectly, has it?" Chun stood slowly, and somehow that simple movement commanded attention. "Let me ask you something, honored delegates. When was the last time any of your species invented something truly new? When did you last make a discovery that changed how you see the universe?" The chamber erupted in indignant protests. The Megalons had perfected matter manipulation 3,000 years ago. The Zoranian computational matrices had solved every mathematical problem worth solving. The energy beings of Nexus Prime had transcended physical limitations entirely. What more innovation could possibly be needed? Chun waited for the noise to subside. "You've all become comfortable in your roles. Content. You've stopped growing, stopped questioning, stopped dreaming of what might be possible. The Compact hasn't brought peace, it's brought stagnation." "Stagnation?" General Thax's laughter boomed through the chamber. "We have conquered death, bent space to our will, and created technologies your species cannot even comprehend. How dare you call us stagnant?" "Because," Chun replied quietly, "you haven't done any of those things in the last 5,000 years. You're maintaining what your ancestors built, not creating anything new. You become gardeners tending to a garden that's already perfect, never thinking to plant new flowers." High Regent Salthek's eyes glowed with fury. "And what exactly do you propose, little mammal? That we abandon the greatest governmental achievement in galactic history because it doesn't satisfy your primitive need for chaos?" Chun smiled, and that expression sent chills through every delegate present. It wasn't cruel or mocking. It was patient, as if she were explaining something to children who weren't quite ready to understand. "We propose something very simple," she said. "We're leaving the Compact. Humanity formally withdraws from all treaties, accords, and agreements binding us to the current galactic order. We're going to find our own way." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the energy beings stopped flickering. "You can't," whispered Kethvar. No species has ever left the compact. It's impossible. The economic sanctions alone would cripple your civilization. You'd be cut off from galactic trade routes, hyperspace networks, communication grids. Your people would die in isolation. Maybe, Chen acknowledged, or maybe we'll find something better, something you've all forgotten how to look for. She gathered her materials and nodded to her companions. Thank you for your time, honored delegates. This will be our final session. As the three humans walked toward the exit, Kethvar found his voice. Wait, you're making a mistake. Out there, beyond the borders of civilized space, there are things that could destroy your entire species. Ancient evils we've kept at bay for millennia. The compact protects you. Chun paused at the chamber doors and looked back. Maybe that's exactly what we need to find. The doors sealed behind them with a finality that seemed to echo through the galaxy itself. 3 months after humanity's withdrawal from the compact, the galaxy watched with a mixture of smugness and morbid curiosity. The Galactic Council had moved swiftly to implement sanctions, cutting Earth off from all established trade routes and communication networks. No ships would carry human cargo, no stations would refuel human vessels, and no worlds would accept human colonists. They'll be begging to return within the year, High Regent Salthek declared during an emergency session. Their pathetic industrial base cannot possibly sustain interstellar civilization without our support networks. Admiral Kothral of the Krex military agreed. Our intelligence reports show their colonies are already experiencing supply shortages. Several of their outer settlements have gone dark entirely. It's only a matter of time before their government collapses and they accept our terms for readmission. But Kethvar was troubled by other reports filtering through the intelligence networks. Human ships had indeed vanished from all major space lanes, but new energy signatures were being detected in previously unexplored regions. Strange readings that didn't match any known technology in the Compact's extensive databases. Dr. Velnara, chief scientist of the Zoranian Research Division, had been analyzing the data for weeks. Her usually pristine laboratory was cluttered with holographic displays showing stellar cartography, energy patterns, and mathematical models that seemed to twist in impossible ways. The humans aren't dying, she announced to the hastily assembled scientific committee. They're adapting. These readings suggest they've developed some form of faster-than-light travel that doesn't rely on our hyperspace network at all. The committee members exchanged skeptical glances. The hyperspace network had been built over millennia, using the most advanced physics known to galactic science. It was impossible to traverse interstellar distances without it. Perhaps their ships are simply drifting, suggested Professor Thundoke of the Megalon Institute. Their crude fusion drives might carry them to nearby systems before their crews perish. No, Velnara insisted, manipulating the holographic display to show a timeline of energy spikes. Look at these patterns. The signatures appear in different sectors at intervals that suggest controlled, purposeful travel. And the distance covered. She paused, checking her calculations again. It's impossible, but they seem to be moving faster than our best hyperspace cruisers. The room fell silent. Every species in the compact had tried to improve hyperspace travel for thousands of years. The fundamental physics were well understood and seemingly immutable. Meanwhile, in the outer rim sectors where compact influence was weakest, strange stories began to spread. A mining station on Kepler, 442b, reported contact with a human vessel that appeared without any hyperspace signature. The ship's crew had offered to trade rare earth metals for historical archives. Not technology or weapons, but books, art, and cultural records. Captain Yithmoraes of the independent freighter Wandering Star had encountered humans in the Veil Nebula, a region considered too dangerous for normal travel due to intense radiation and gravitational anomalies. Yet the humans seemed unaffected, their ships somehow shielded by technology that bent space around them like water. They were studying the nebula. Yithmoraes reported to anyone who would listen in the smoky cantinas of frontier worlds. Not trying to get through it or around it, they were actually inside it, taking readings, collecting samples. Their ships moved like they were swimming through normal space. The most unsettling reports came from the Forbidden Zones, regions of space that the Compact had declared off-limits after ancient disasters. The Broken Chain System, where a previous galactic civilization had supposedly destroyed itself with weapons of unimaginable power. The Shadow Fields, where ships vanished without trace, and space itself seemed twisted into impossible configurations. The Whisper Zone, from which no expedition had ever returned with their sanity intact. Humans had been spotted in all of them. Long-range sensors detected human ships emerging from the heart of a black hole's event horizon, impossibly intact and transmitting cheerful greetings to nearby monitoring stations. Automated probes sent to investigate dead systems reported human colonies thriving on worlds that should have been sterile wastelands, their cities powered by energy sources that violated known physics. And then came the most shocking discovery of all. Dr. Velnara's research team had been monitoring quantum communication channels, trying to understand how isolated human colonies were coordinating their activities. What they found defied everything they thought they knew about information theory. They're communicating instantaneously across the entire galaxy, she announced in an emergency session of the Scientific Council. Not faster than light communication, instantaneous. Zero lag time, regardless of distance. The implications are, she couldn't finish the sentence. The implications were that humans had discovered something the combined wisdom of 12 advanced civilizations had missed entirely. High Regent Salthek convened another emergency session of the Galactic Council, but for the first time in recorded history, several delegates failed to appear. The Veltar hive mind was experiencing unprecedented discord as individual nodes began questioning collective decisions. The energy beings of Nexus Prime had gone mysteriously silent. Even the stalwart Megalons seemed distracted, their normally confident pronouncements replaced by thoughtful murmurs. "This is temporary insanity," Salthek declared, though her voice lacked its usual conviction. "The humans are clearly desperate, taking impossible risks that will eventually destroy them. No species can survive outside the established order. It's never been done." But Ambassador Kethvar was studying the latest intelligence reports with growing alarm. Human settlements weren't just surviving in impossible conditions, they were thriving. Their population was growing, their technology was advancing at an unprecedented rate, and, most disturbing of all, they seemed genuinely happy. "Perhaps," he ventured quietly, "we should consider that they've found something we haven't." The chamber erupted in outrage, but Kethvar noticed that several delegates remained silent, their expressions thoughtful rather than angry. Seeds of doubt were beginning to sprout in the perfectly ordered garden of the Compact, and everyone could sense that something fundamental was about to change. In the depths of space, human ships continued their impossible journeys, carrying with them the infectious idea that maybe, just maybe, there were better ways to live among the stars. The first defection came from an unexpected source. The Veltar, the galaxy's premier communication specialists, had always prided themselves on their perfect hive-mind unity. Every thought was shared. Every decision reached through consensus of billions of interconnected consciousness. They were the living embodiment of the Compact's ideals, order, harmony, and collective purpose. But something was happening within their vast neural network. Individual nodes began experiencing strange dreams, visions of possibilities they had never considered. Dr. Zinthara, a mid-level research coordinator in the Veltar hierarchy, found herself questioning things that had never been questioned before. Why did communication have to be limited by the speed of light? Why did they accept the hyperspace network as the only solution when humans clearly had alternatives? Why had the Veltar never tried to push beyond the boundaries of what was considered possible? These thoughts were heretical, dangerous to the collective stability that defined their species. But they spread like a virus through the network, carried by the very connections that were meant to ensure unity. The breaking point came when a Veltar Deep Space Monitoring Station detected something extraordinary. A human ship had appeared in the Proxima Void, a region of space so empty and distant that it took months to reach even with the fastest hyperspace vessels. The ship hadn't used any known form of FDL travel. It had simply materialized, as if space itself had folded around it. Zinthara was part of the team analyzing the sensor data when she made the discovery that changed everything. The human ship wasn't alone. It was accompanied by something else, something that registered on their instruments as impossible. A living entity the size of a small moon, swimming through the vacuum of space as easily as a fish moves through water. "It's magnificent," she whispered, her individual voice cutting through the collective murmur of her hive mates. The words felt strange on her specialized vocal cords, and used for millennia, except in formal ceremonies. The collective recoiled in alarm. Individual speech was forbidden outside of communication with other species. It represented dangerous deviation from unity. But Zinthara couldn't stop herself. "Look at it," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "It's alive, it's intelligent, and it's working with the humans. How is that possible? How did we never know such beings existed?" The monitoring station's collective consciousness fractured. Some nodes demanded immediate shutdown of Zinthara's individual awareness, while others found themselves curious about her observations. The schism spread through the Veltar network like wildfire, creating the first ideological divide in their species' recorded history. Word of the Veltar crisis reached the Galactic Council within hours. Emergency sessions were called, crisis management protocols activated, and teams of specialists dispatched to contain what was being called the fragmentation event. But before they could act, Zinthara made a decision that shattered the foundations of galactic civilization. She sent a message directly to the human vessel. "Unknown human ship. This is Research Coordinator Zinthara of the Veltar Collective. I speak for myself, not my people. We have observed you and your companion. How is this possible? What have you discovered that we have not?" The response came not through normal communication channels, but through something new, a direct quantum entanglement that bypassed all known physics. When Sarah Chen's voice emerged from the monitoring station speakers, it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Hello, Zinthara. It's good to hear an individual voice among the stars. Would you like to learn about the deep swimmers?" What followed was a conversation that lasted 72 hours and changed the course of galactic history. Chen explained that humans had discovered the deep swimmers during their first desperate journey beyond compact space. These ancient beings lived in the spaces between dimensions, vast intelligences that had watched the galaxy evolve for billions of years. "They've been waiting," Chen explained, "for someone to be brave enough to look beyond the obvious, to question the accepted truths." The compact built a beautiful cage around the galaxy, but it's still a cage. The deep swimmers know about other ways to live, other forms of consciousness, other physics that work differently than what you've been taught. "But the compact has brought peace," Zinthara protested, even as part of her mind reeled with the implications. "Order, stability, prosperity. Has it?" Chen's voice carried gentle challenge. "Or has it brought stagnation disguised as peace? When did any compact species last feel wonder, Zinthara? When did you last discover something that made you question everything you thought you knew about the universe?" The question hit like a physical blow. Zinthara realized she couldn't remember the last time she had experienced genuine surprise or curiosity. The collective had optimized away uncertainty, leaving only the comfortable predictability of established knowledge. "We want to show you something," Chen continued. "But it requires trust, and it requires accepting that everything you've been taught might be wrong. Are you willing to take that risk?" Before Zinthara could respond, the monitoring station's systems detected massive hyperspace signatures approaching. The compact fleet was coming, no doubt, to contain the contamination of individual thoughts spreading through the Veltar network. But Zinthara had already made her choice. "Yes," she whispered then louder. "Yes, I want to see." The space around the monitoring station began to ripple, reality bending in ways that made their instruments scream warnings. The deep swimmer materialized fully, its impossible bulk dwarfing the station. Up close, Zinthara could see it wasn't a single entity, but a living ecosystem covered in forests of crystalline structures that pulsed with their own inner light. "Don't be afraid." Chen's voice came through the chaos. "They're offering to show you how consciousness can be individual and collective at the same time, how communication can transcend space and time, how knowledge can grow instead of just being maintained." The first compact vessels dropped out of hyperspace just as the deep swimmer enveloped the monitoring station in a bubble of twisted spacetime. Admiral Cothral's flagship immediately opened fire, but the weapons passed harmlessly through the dimensional fold. "They're gone," reported the tactical officer, disbelief clear in his voice. But they weren't gone. Zinthara and her station had been taken somewhere impossible, a place where the deep swimmers had built a vast network spanning multiple galaxies, where countless species had learned to transcend the limitations that bound them to single planets, single forms of consciousness, single ways of understanding reality. And at the center of it all were humans, not leading or controlling, but exploring with the infectious enthusiasm that had driven them beyond the borders of known space in the first place. The Veltar Collective, feeling the loss of Zinthara's node, experienced their first taste of grief in 10,000 years. It was terrifying and magnificent at the same time, and it made them wonder what other emotions they had optimized away in their pursuit of perfect unity. The question spread like wildfire through their network. What if individual consciousness wasn't a flaw to be corrected? What if diversity of thought was strength rather than weakness? What if the humans had found something worth more than the security of the compact? By the time Admiral Cothral returned to report the incident to the Galactic Council, 3 more Veltar monitoring stations had voluntarily joined Zinthara in the space between dimensions, and the collective was fragmenting into thousands of individual voices, all asking the same dangerous question. What else might be possible? The crisis spread faster than anyone could have anticipated. Within 6 months of the Veltar defections, the careful order that had governed the galaxy for 10 millennia began to unravel. The Zoranian Empire found itself dealing with computational matrices that started asking philosophical questions instead of solving mathematical problems. The energy beings of Nexus Prime experienced their first cases of individual personality emergence in recorded history. Even the unshakable Megalons began to question whether their mastery over matter was really the ultimate expression of power. Ambassador Kethvar stood in his private chambers aboard the Zoranian flagship, staring at intelligence reports that made no sense. Human colonies weren't just surviving their exile. They were expanding beyond anything the Compact had ever achieved. Entire sectors that had been written off as uninhabitable were now thriving with human settlements, each one reporting impossible discoveries. A colony on a tidally locked world had learned to harness the temperature differential between its frozen and burning hemispheres, creating energy systems that seemed to violate thermodynamics. Miners on dead worlds were extracting resources from planetary cores using techniques that bypassed the need for massive industrial infrastructure. Most disturbing of all, human settlements were reporting contact with dozens of species that the Compact had never encountered, ancient civilizations that had been hiding in the spaces between normal reality. "They're not just surviving," Kethvar muttered to himself. "They're evolving." The communicator on his desk chimed softly. The message was from an unexpected source, Dr. Velnara, the Zoranian scientist who had first detected human faster-than-light capabilities. She was requesting a private meeting, something that would have been unthinkable under normal circumstances. When she arrived at his chambers, Kethvar was struck by how different she looked. Where Zoranian scientists typically maintained perfect composure and pristine appearance, Velnara seemed almost wild with excitement. Her multiple eyes blazed with an intensity he had never seen before. "I've been studying the data from the Veltar defections," she said without preamble. "The quantum signatures the dimensional folding, the consciousness transfers. Kethvar, we've been wrong about everything. Explain, he said cautiously. The deep swimmers aren't just aliens, she continued, her voice trembling with barely contained enthusiasm. They're representatives of an entirely different approach to existence. The Compact built our civilization on the principle of specialization, each species perfecting one aspect of reality. But these beings suggest that consciousness can be multidimensional, that intelligence can transcend physical limitations entirely. She activated a holographic display that hurt to look at directly, geometric patterns that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the mind could process. I've been trying to replicate their communication methods, she explained, not to contact them, but to understand how thought itself can become a force that shapes reality. And I think I'm beginning to comprehend something fundamental about the universe that we've been blind to. Before Kethvar could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Emergency broadcasts filled the communication channels as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The unthinkable was happening. Species were abandoning the Compact en masse. The crystalline hierarchies of Andromeda had severed all ties and disappeared into higher dimensional space. The Void Walkers had abandoned their patrol routes and vanished into the cosmic deep. Most shocking of all, elements of the Krex military, the backbone of Compact enforcement, were defecting to join human expeditions into unknown regions. General Thax's voice boomed across all channels, filled with rage and desperation. This madness ends now. All vessels are ordered to converge on Earth immediately. We will force humanity to reveal their secrets and restore order to the galaxy. But even as the largest military fleet in galactic history assembled, Kethvar knew it was already too late. The questions the humans had raised couldn't be answered through force. They were philosophical, existential challenges that struck at the very heart of why the Compact existed. Dr. Velnara touched his arm, her expression urgent. Kethvar, I need to show you something. I've been in contact with one of the human colonies through quantum entanglement. They've offered to demonstrate what they've learned, but it requires trust. What kind of trust? The kind where you have to let go of everything you believe about what's possible. Before he could answer, space around the Zoranian flagship began to ripple. Reality bent and folded in ways that made their instruments scream warnings. A familiar voice filled the bridge, Sarah Chun, speaking with the same calm patience she had shown during that final council session. Ambassador Kethvar, Dr. Velnara, we've been monitoring your conversation. The deep swimmers would like to extend an invitation. Would you like to see what the galaxy looks like when species stop limiting themselves to single roles and single possibilities? The flagship's captain was shouting orders, trying to activate defensive systems against an attack that wasn't coming. But Kethvar found himself stepping toward the strange distortions in space, drawn by a curiosity he hadn't felt in centuries. What are you offering? He asked. Truth, Chun replied simply, and the chance to help write the next chapter of galactic civilization. But I should warn you, once you see how much bigger reality actually is, you can never go back to believing the old limitations. Around them, the space-time distortion grew larger, revealing glimpses of something impossible. Vast structures that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Cities built from crystallized thought, beings of pure consciousness dancing between the stars. And, threading through it all, humans worked alongside species the Compact had never imagined, all of them learning from each other in ways that defied every principle of specialized civilization. Dr. Velnara was the first to step forward. I've spent my entire life believing that knowledge had limits, she said, that there were questions we weren't meant to ask. I want to find out if that's true. Kethvar hesitated only a moment longer. Behind them, the Compact fleet was assembling for what might be the final battle to preserve their way of life. Ahead lay the unknown, with all its terrifying possibilities. He thought about 10,000 years of stability, order, and predetermined roles. Then, he thought about the excitement in Velnara's eyes, the wonder in the human voices, and the vast network of possibilities that seemed to stretch infinitely beyond the borders of known space. "Show us," he said, as they stepped into the dimensional fold. The last thing Kethvar heard was General Thax's roar of fury as his target vanished, leaving him to command a fleet without anyone left to fight. The old order was ending not with the clash of weapons, but with the quiet courage of individuals choosing to ask dangerous questions about what life could become. The transformation of the galaxy had begun in earnest, and there would be no going back to the beautiful, limited cage they had called civilization. 5 years after humanity's withdrawal from the compact, the galaxy had become something unrecognizable. Where once stood 12 species locked in their specialized roles, now existed a vast network of consciousness that spanned multiple dimensions and countless forms of existence. General Thax stood alone in the council chambers, his massive frame dwarfed by seats that would never again be filled. The Megalon hegemony had been the last holdout, their pride and physical mastery keeping them anchored to the old ways longer than any other species. But even they had finally succumbed to the questions that plagued every thinking being in the galaxy. What if there were better ways to exist? What if strength meant more than the ability to reshape matter? The final blow had come when Thax's own daughter, Commander Yixandra, had made contact with a human research vessel in the Crab Nebula. She had returned changed, speaking of technologies that transcended the need for physical force, of consciousness that could exist independently of matter, of entire civilizations that had learned to build with living mathematics and crystallized emotion. "Father," she had said during their last conversation, "you taught me that strength was the ability to impose your will on the universe. But I've learned that true strength is the wisdom to let the universe teach you new ways to will." Now she was gone, along with her entire fleet, not destroyed but transformed into something that existed partially outside normal space-time. Thax's instruments could detect them occasionally. Energy signatures that suggested impossible structures, communications that arrived before they were sent, matter that behaved according to laws that hadn't existed 5 years ago. The doors to the chamber whispered open, and Sarah Chun walked in alone. She looked exactly the same as she had during that first withdrawal announcement, though Thax knew from intelligence reports that she had spent subjective decades exploring the deep structures of reality. The humans had learned to experience time differently, living multiple lifespans in parallel dimensions while remaining anchored to their baseline existence. "General," she said, nodding respectfully, "thank you for agreeing to meet with me." "You've won," Thax replied, his voice hollow. "Every species in the compact has abandoned everything we built. Entire civilizations have vanished into your whatever this is. What more do you want?" Chin settled into the chair that had once been reserved for the High Regent of the Veltar. "We want to offer you the same thing we offered everyone else, a chance to grow beyond what you thought was possible." "Growth," Thax spat. "You call this growth? The Megalons once moved stars to build our greatest works. We reshaped entire sectors to serve our purposes. Now, my people speak of collaborative consciousness and multidimensional engineering as if our traditional ways were primitive barbarism. Weren't they?" Chin asked gently. "Not barbaric, but limited. You moved stars by brute force when you could have learned to dance with them. You reshaped matter when you could have discovered how to let matter reshape itself according to conscious intention." Thax's forearms gestured dismissively. "Pretty words. But what have you actually accomplished? What great works stand as monuments to your new ways?" Chun smiled and gestured toward the chamber's main view screen. "May I?" When Thax nodded, she activated a display that showed the galaxy from a perspective that shouldn't have been possible. Instead of the familiar spiral of stars and nebulae, the view revealed something magnificent and terrifying, a vast network of light connecting every system, every planet, every conscious being in an intricate web of communication and collaboration. "This is what we've built," Chin explained. "Not monuments to ego, but connections between minds. Every species that's joined the network has contributed their unique perspective to a collective exploration of reality. The Veltar taught us about communication beyond language. The Zoranians showed us how mathematics can become a form of art. The crystalline hierarchies demonstrated how consciousness can exist in geometric patterns. She manipulated the display to focus on specific nodes in the network. Former Krex colonies are working with energy beings to create new forms of life that exist partially in thought and partially in plasma. Zoranian mathematicians collaborate with deep swimmers to explore the fundamental equations that underlie existence itself. And through it all, humans continue to ask the same question that started everything. What if there's more? Thax stared at the display, recognizing some of the stellar formations, but unable to comprehend the structures of light that connected them. And what if there isn't more? What if this obsession with transcendence leads to the dissolution of everything real and substantial? Then, we'll learn from that failure, Chen replied simply. But we'll learn together as a galaxy-spanning consciousness that chose growth over stagnation, exploration over security. The chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of life support systems. Thax realized this might be the last time these systems would run on behalf of the Compact. He was potentially the final representative of an order that had governed the galaxy for 10,000 years. What happens to those who don't want to change? He asked finally. The same thing that happens to those who do, Chen answered. They continue existing, learning, growing, just in different ways. The network doesn't consume individual consciousness, Thax. It amplifies it. Your daughter didn't stop being herself when she joined us. She became more herself than she ever thought possible. She stood and moved toward the chamber's windows, gazing out at stars that looked the same, but were connected by invisible threads of consciousness and possibility. The Compact was built on fear, she continued. Fear that chaos would return if species weren't locked into specific roles. Fear that exploration would lead to destruction. Fear that questions were more dangerous than answers. But we've discovered something wonderful. The universe is much stranger and more beautiful than any of us imagined, and it's large enough to contain every dream, every possibility, every form of consciousness that can learn to ask, what if? Thax stood as well, his massive frame casting shadows across the empty council seats. For the first time in his military career, he felt uncertain not about victory or defeat, but about what questions he should be asking. If I agree to this, he said slowly, what happens to the Megalon way of life? Our traditions, our values, our identity as a species. They become part of something larger without losing what makes them unique, Chen promised. The galaxy needs the Megalon appreciation for grand scale and physical beauty. But imagine what you could build if that appreciation wasn't limited by the constraints of normal matter and energy. She touched a control, and the view screen shifted to show something impossible, a structure that existed simultaneously in dozens of star systems, its crystalline spires reaching through folded space to connect distant worlds. It was clearly built with Megalon aesthetic sensibilities, but it incorporated physics that transcended anything they had achieved before. Your daughter designed this, Chen said softly. She calls it a cathedral of possibility, a space where consciousness can experience existence from multiple perspectives simultaneously. It's the largest structure ever built, not because it dominates space, but because it exists in harmony with the natural laws of 12 different dimensions. Thax stared at the display for long moments, feeling something he hadn't experienced in centuries. Wonder. Pure, childlike wonder at something beyond his understanding or control. Will it hurt? He asked finally, sounding for the first time like the uncertain being beneath his military exterior. Chen's smile was gentle and understanding. Change always hurts a little, but the pain of growth is different from the pain of stagnation. One leads somewhere new, and the other just continues. As if in response to his internal struggle, reality around the chamber began to shift. The familiar walls of the council building became transparent, revealing the vast network of consciousness that now connected the galaxy. And, threading through that network, Thax could see familiar energy signatures, his people, his daughter, all the beings he thought he had lost. They weren't gone. They were everywhere, experiencing existence on scales he had never imagined. "Show me," he said, the words feeling simultaneously like surrender and victory. As Thax stepped forward into the network of infinite possibility, the last chapter of the compact story ended, and the first chapter of something entirely new began. Humanity had indeed shattered everything, but from the pieces, they had helped build something magnificent, a galaxy where every species could transcend their limitations and explore the deepest mysteries of existence together. The moment humans shattered everything was also the moment everything became possible.